Thank you, Paul, and thanks all for attending, and apologies again for the late start of this technical webinar. I'm proud to be presenting on behalf of the Australian section tonight, giving highlights on delay analysis from the Australian market, and I'm pleased that we have a colleague from Egypt, Hussam Kandeel, giving his views on the current delay analysis issues from the Egyptian market. I'll try to give you a bit of background about myself. So I'm a civil engineer, chartered engineer in cost engineering, project management, with a number of qualifications on project management and forensic planning. I have over 16 years of international experience, mainly in the Middle East, Australia, and New Zealand. I normally work in extension of time claims, assisting clients preparing and defending delay claims. Sometimes I also provide independent expert opinion on delay matters. I currently work as a senior associate director with CCI. In my part tonight, I'll try to give you a brief description of what delay analysis is about and the purpose of delay analysis, and I'll also refer to the available common industry guidelines in Australia and highlight some key aspects from the Australian market in terms of delay analysis. Now, when we talk about delay generally, I would think of a project with a timeline, and normally that timeline is called a baseline program. And when you start a project, you start having sometimes events which are hindering your progress, and again, those are normally called delay events. So they could happen at any point in time of the project, and normally you would end up with a delay impact because of those delay events. Now, the key question that we normally try to answer when we do the delay analysis: was there a delay? Because sometimes you might have some sort of delay to an activity that would not necessarily cause an impact on the completion date. So it's important to realize if there was a real delay, and we might call it a critical delay in this context. And even when we establish that there was a delay, it's important to try to break it down into periods and to allocate that delay to specific delay events. And it's also important to distinguish between the delay period of the delay event itself and then the delay impact resulting from that delay period. So those are the kinds of answers we provide by doing the delay analysis. And subsequently, we can allocate the responsibility and liability between the parties, depending on what events we think were critical and caused critical delay. And in doing so, it's important to consider the project progress, any recovery, acceleration, mitigation, or pacing of activities that happened during the project, assuming the project is already in progress or have been completed. Now, in Australia, there are two main sources of guidelines in terms of delay analysis. The first is the AACE International Recommended Practices 29 and 52. So 29 deals with forensic schedule analysis, and 52 deals with prospective time impact analysis. The second source is the Society of Construction Law Delay and Disruption Protocol. Now, I have to say that the Society of Construction Law Delay and Disruption Protocol is more commonly used in Australia and more commonly referenced in documents in Australia. The AACE recommended practices are sometimes used, but mostly by planners and schedulers rather than delay experts or delay analysts. And I understand that the Australian section here is trying to increase the awareness about those recommended practices and how good they are in terms of delay analysis. Now, if we go to the SCL protocol, it describes a number of delay analysis methods, maybe over 10 methods, but this summarize them into 6 most commonly methods in the industry internationally, and those are the key 6 methods that are relied upon in Australia as well. Just to give a brief explanation of each one of them, if we start with the first one, which is called the impacted as planned method. This method is widely used by contractors in Australia, and it's probably the simplest method. You just take your planned intent, the baseline program, you impact it with the delay event or events, and then you get your impact on the completion date. Now, it includes lots of assumptions in terms of the impacts of those delay events, and it ignores the actual progress that happened already if the project was already in progress or has been completed. Therefore, although it's widely used by contractors, it's not normally acceptable form of delay analysis once the dispute goes to a further process, or like there's a decision making required on it. Now, the second common method in Australia is the time impact analysis. Now, I see it as an improved version of the impact as planned analysis. It mainly does the same thing, but instead of using the baseline as the base for the analysis, it uses a more recent progress update just before the occurrence of those delay events in question. It's also nowadays becoming more commonly used, and I think it is reasonable to use the time impact analysis from a contractor perspective or even employer perspective during the project, where you are trying to estimate the delay period that still has to come because of those delay events. Now, the third method in the site of construction law delay and disruption protocol is the time slice windows analysis, and this is commonly called windows analysis in industry in Australia. It's basically an observational method where you don't necessarily impact the delay events. You just analyze the available programs and progress updates and come up with a view on the forecast delay in each one of those windows, and then try to link it with one of the causes of delay. It's a reasonable method, less subjective in terms of the impact of those delay events, because you're not inserting any delay events in this method. But however, it does rely on the quality of the available progress reports. So if there are major changes to those progress reports or progress programs, there will be a justification required for any change, and it might be difficult to get the proper estimation of the delay impact or link it to the causation at a certain point. The next one is the as planned versus as built windows analysis. Now, it's important to note that this is not the as planned as built analysis, the static one that's also known internationally. It's done in Windows, and it's not exactly simple as planned versus as built window analysis. It's more of a subjective view of what was happening during the project. It doesn't necessarily rely on programs, and so it's probably most suitable when we don't have programs, or we don't have good programs of good quality in a project. So it's very similar to the time slice windows analysis in that it is done in Windows, but it requires a review of the available as built records to come up with a view on the critical path and the critical delay period when compared to the relevant baseline schedule. And as you see, because it doesn't necessarily rely on programs, it requires lots of justifications to explain any conclusion reached in the method. Now, the fifth method in the site of construction law is the retrospective longest path analysis. And it's probably as simple as that. You just take an as-built program or the latest available progress update. You determine the as-built critical path or the longest critical path, and then compare it to the baseline and measure the delay from there. It's common in Australia to use it for indication purpose, but it doesn't normally work for proper delay analysis, because you would want to know if there was a change to the critical path during the project, or and also a split of the delay periods within the project period rather than an overall delay at the end of the project. The last method is the collapsed as built analysis. It's also like commonly known in Australia, but it's rarely used, and it's mainly because of the difficulty of having a proper as-built program reflecting all the actual sequence, actual logic, and actual activities. The concept is that you take that as-built program, including any delay events, and then by extracting those delay events, you would know what would be the completion date, or the end, or the impact of the activity, or the impact on the program without those, but for those delay events. And as I've said, it's not commonly used in Australia. Now, just giving an extract from the AACE Australian AACE recommended practice 29, we can see that the categorization looks different in terms of those delay events. So delay analysis methods, it splits them into observational and modeled, static, dynamic, additive, subtractive. But when we look at the details and we look at those common names used, we realize they largely match with those 6 main delay analysis methods in the Society of Construction law. So although it's not commonly referenced in Australian market, but in somehow it is used, and I think it has more details of how to apply those methods than the Society of Construction law delay and disruption protocol, because the latter simply just explains or recommends certain methods without going into the detail of how to apply those methods. Now, having said all of that, probably the first thing to look at is the contracts in Australia. Now, my own personal experience is that most of the contracts in Australia are bespoke contracts, so each project will have its own contract, although many use the AS 4000 set of standard contracts or a bespoke version of it. Now, the concept generally is that they would have a clause there that allows you to notify delay and claim extension of time contemporaneously, where that would allow you also to consider delays which haven't happened, like that probably it says will probably cause delay to the completion date, and that gives you an opportunity to use one of those prospective delay analysis methods. Now, contracts also generally talk about the delay, that the delay should have actually happened before you claim extension of time, and this sometimes causes confusion where it talks about prospective delay analysis and something that will happen, and then talks about actual delay that must have happened. But I think the distinction here is that the delay that must have happened here is the delay event, the delay period, not the delay impact. Now, we normally have to go through the entire contract, including any definitions of delay or accepted risks or time for completion, the types of events or accepted risks in that sense, before we conclude on the best method or the most appropriate method to be used. The key difficulty we find is that because the contracts allow for prospective delay analysis methods, we find contractors, although the project is completed, for example, they still want to apply prospective delay analysis methods like the impact that's planned or time impact analysis, while the common industry practice requires a more sophisticated analysis with the retrospective view using the as-built records. Now, just to clarify here, probably that's my interpretation, but when we talk about prospective delay analysis, we're only estimating the delay, because you are just putting an event and expecting what's going to be the impact, while retrospective delay analysis methods would normally deal with determining the actual period of delay. Now, the claims we normally face in Australia, it's like typical extension of time claims on ongoing projects, and you would normally expect to have contemporaneous delay analysis on those. We also find extension of time claims for completed projects, and we still find people using contemporaneous or like prospective delay analysis methods, but we suggest that they should use retrospective delay analysis methods in such cases. We also have lots of adjudication matters, mainly through the security of payment claims regime, which is very common in Australia and is even different between the states of Australia. Contracts here also generally sometimes include clauses for expert determination, arbitration, and litigation in case the dispute develops further beyond the control of the project. Now, in terms of the key delay types of delay events in Australia, probably the access delays is the most common. We get lots of government projects here requiring access, for example, to public areas or private properties, and access to such areas normally would have some sort of delays, and those are very common in projects. We have the typical design delays where contractors start working before getting the full design, and once they started, they realize the design would still take time and causes delay. Weather delays is also very common, and it normally causes issues as well because it's well known and very common in Australia. Employers started including clauses to make contractors bear some of that risks. So sometimes you find contracts saying like the first 10 days, for example, of weather delays would have to be bared by the contractor, and this creates more difficulties in analyzing the delays, where we have to split the liability of the first 10 days and the next days, for example, and whether those were critical or not. Plus, adding to this, that whenever we have such complication in the contract, you would get the contractors finding different ways to include that weather allowance within the program. So some people just add an activity at the end as a float period or as a weather allowance, or some other people just do specific days in their calendars, or just generally some non-working days within their calendars. Procurement delays. Most of the materials in Australia are shipped from abroad, and that would also cause delays from normally. Latent conditions, like probably every holiday in Australia, you might get some unexpected rock or contaminated soil, and those will require special treatment and more effort to finish the excavation activities. Change in legislations, especially now in the current COVID situations with the lockdowns and restrictions, are very common as part of both delay and disruption claims. Some contracts specifically include pandemics like the COVID as a force majeure event, so those are also nowadays common. And the most common counterclaim is the contractor's slow progress, where the employers just blame the contractor for their own inefficiencies, and that would bring its own difficulty in the analysis in terms of production and loss of productivity. Now, like anywhere else in the world, you would expect to have some kind of proper records when you analyze the delays. And unfortunately, although the Australian market is quite developed in terms of construction and preparation for projects, you don't normally find adequate records to substantiate claims. So we normally either do not have any kind of progress updates or like programs that show the progress during the project. And even when you find those, you don't find necessarily records that substantiate those records, or what's even worse, you might find contradicting records. So all of these just brings more complexity to the analysis and trying to find the best way to present a case, or to find the true critical path and delay impact. Now, another complexity we have here is the time bars. Probably like everywhere in the world, we have time limitations and the contract, so you have to provide the initial notice of a claim within a certain period, and then you have to submit the extension of time claim itself within a certain period, and you have a requirement for further notices for ongoing events. And with each of these, you would have to provide some sort of substantiation, sometimes an impacted program, and those are generally, from my own experience, are difficult to deal or to comply with, and that's what the contractors are doing. They're trying their best, but you don't normally find them complying with those requirements. Now, what adds to that is the common adjudication cases as part of the security of payment claims, where you have very limited time to produce a proper and full appropriate delay expert report. And with the time frame that's available, sometimes 15 or 20 days, depending on which state you are, it's very difficult to produce or to understand the full claim and produce something that is reliable. So we normally end up just trying to do our best and just explain the things which we have assumed or couldn't do in the available short time frame. In terms of the softwares used, most of the small projects, I think my own experience is they just use MS Microsoft project, which is not very helpful in terms of analyzing delays and getting the history of the project. Bigger projects normally use Primavera P6, and that's probably the most common. Some projects, mainly the horizontal ones, uses things like turbo charts. I've also seen Astapor project, and some large organizations also use Acumen Fuse, but that's more for analyzing the quality of their programs or doing the probability studies for their as part of their risk analysis. Now, I think the key difficulty here also in Australia, in that you often hear clients talking about bringing the analyst or asking the planner just to do the impacted program, and that gives the impression that it's all about just one impacted program, while the reality, the delay analysis exercise or the claim is just the whole thing. So you would expect to have a full EOT claim explaining the full delay analysis and also including any instructions, facts, or assumptions made in that delay analysis. It doesn't work with just providing an impacted program or just relying on a software to tell you what was the impact. There must be an explanation of what actually happened in the analysis and justification of the conclusions, and making sure those conclusions make sense when you see them. Now, other common issues, like probably almost in every project here, you get a change sequence of work. So because of those access issues, for example, as a mitigation measure, you get contractors changing or starting a different point than the plan, and that has to be taken into account when you analyze the delays. It's not necessarily difficult to do so, but it adds complexity to the analysis, and sometimes it makes it difficult to rely on programs as is, so you end up coming with different ways of analyzing the delays. Concurrent delays is also a common argument by employers, and because we have bespoke contracts, you end up with different definition of concurrent delay and how to deal with concurrent delay in each project, so that adds also complexity. The ownership of float is an issue as well. I don't like it's rarely defined under the contract, although some of them says it's owned by the project. Now, the common industry practice says that it is owned by the project, but we get difficulties when we see activities, for example, for the weather allowance assigned by the contractor, or when you get a contractor having a completion date earlier than the contractual completion date, where it says that it allowed for its own float there. And when the delay happens, the employers would start arguing that this is a project float, for example. So it's a case by case probably analysis, but it's something to take into account when considering overall the issues in Australia. Now, mitigation and acceleration is also another issue. We often see contractors doing some sort of constructive acceleration, where they say they had to accelerate, they had to mitigate, but you can't really see that from their program. So you end up digging into more records to find ways to demonstrate that mitigation or acceleration. disruption claims are very common, and what's also common is the disruption effect of those delays. So as part of your delay analysis, you end up doing full disruption analysis just to analyze that disruption effect on the completion date. The softwares used generally, whether like Microsoft Project or Primavera P6, for example, would have certain settings that can be changed. So like planners would normally change the calendars, the working hours. In Primavera P6, they would also change the scheduling settings. You would expect the program in a P6 program to have a retained logic setting so that it can work smoothly and just allow it to use its defined logic. While in Australia, there's a common, I wouldn't say wrong or right here, but it's commonly the progress override and actual dates option is used without taking proper consideration of the consequences. So the idea is that when they see out of sequence works, they think we should change the program to follow that out of sequence work. But in reality, this will not allow the program to respect its own logic and may allow activities to start before its actual predecessors in a way. Now, because I've mentioned disruption, although it's not part of my topic for this evening, but I should say that again, on disruption claims in the Australian market, we heavily rely on the Society of Construction Law protocol. And I would say that the measured mile analysis is the most common and accepted analysis in Australia. And value analysis is also common. We rarely have enough records to do these kinds of analysis, so we end up also supplementing them by work or trade sampling, some project comparison studies or industry studies. And again, it goes back to the lack of sufficient records to demonstrate the disruption issues. Now, to summarize probably here, I should say that all recommended practices say that they are just issued for guidance, and it's up to the analyst to do their own professional judgment and make make sure their analysis makes sense in a way and follows the common sense. However, we often see people refer to the guidelines, mainly the Society of Construction Law Delay and Disruption Protocol, as a piece of law, which is not the case and is often a rejected argument. Now, as a sample case law, in a recent case, relatively recent case in 2019 in New South Wales, the White Constructions and BPS Holdings, there was a design delay issue in a sewage system. There were two experts. Each one of them used an acceptable method under the Society of Construction Law Delay and Disruption Protocol. I think one used the as-planned versus as-built windows analysis, and the other one used time impact analysis, and the court simply rejected both, and the judge got his own expert who simply relied on facts, contemporaneous facts. So they just did a factual analysis of what happened every day and just concluded on the amount of delay that happened because of the claimed design delays. And my comment here that because a method has been used previously or has been listed in one of those guidelines doesn't really have any substantive in terms of decision making. It's all about the justification of the analysis and that the analysis would make sense. And even in this case, I don't necessarily think that there was something wrong with the methods themselves. It's just, it could be that the experts did not put sufficient justifications or explanation of the facts they relied upon as part of that analysis. Now, just to conclude, although there are multiple factors to consider and there are project baselines and progress to take into account, we still see the impact that's planned method widely used in Australia, although project would already have some sort of progress that has to be considered. We are starting to see the time impact analysis more commonly used by contractors, which I think is a reasonable thing to see. However, we still see people using the time impact analysis and the impact as planned analysis after completion of the project, which is not necessarily the best thing to do. My own experience is that experts now tend to use the as planned versus as built windows analysis retrospectively when the project is completed, particularly at an expert level, and I think that's also something good to see. And with that, I conclude, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Yazeed. I wasn't planning to host this, but we're hoping for. Oh, Frank's arrived there.
Okay. Hello, Paul. Hello, Yazeed. Sorry, I was I had some troubles at home, and yeah, finally could join. I could, however, listen 80% of the presentation. Thank you, Yazeed, for such a good presentation. And I guess the next step is request any question. If any of the attendees is having any doubts, any question, any comment, I guess because of the number of attendees, should be all right if we unmute ourselves. If not, we can proceed and listen to the next presenter, Hussam Kandeel. Hussam, are you connected?
Yes, I'm connected and I'm waiting. Thank you very much to you, and thank you very much, Yazeed, for your informative presentation. I'm ready. Just I'm going to ask you, please, just to maintain the quality of the connection, please just shut the video down. I will open the video just to show myself for courtesy, and then I will continue without the video just to maintain the quality of my connection. I'm in the US, so it's 3 a.m., 4 a.m. now in the morning. So I'm going to start my presentation if there's no questions. And again, thank you very much, Yazeed. It's been a pleasure knowing you, and got exposed to your lovely presentation and wide experience in this matter. Most welcome, Yazeed. I hope everyone is seeing my my screen now.
Yes,
I shared my screen. I have to start with that at some points of Yazeed's presentation, I felt that he's talking about Egypt, not about Australia. We have a lot of things in common, Yazeed, especially when you talked about that the SCL protocol, delay and disruption protocol, is the one commonly used in Australia rather than the RP2903. It's actually the same here in Egypt. The market in Egypt is getting matured in relation to extension of time claims during the past 7 to 10 years. I had the pleasure to be exposed to a lot of claims during my job with Hill International, and then my job as a freelancer claim analyst. And currently, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Hussam Pandil. Originally, I come from a project controls background, not a contractual background. I got my degree from Egypt. Recently, I got an expert determiner certificate from the AACE related to ADR issues. Working as project manager for National Bank of Kuwait in Egypt. We are building the new headquarters in the admin capital. I had the pleasure and honor to be the ex-president elected for the AACE International Greater Cairo chapter during the pandemic. Now I'm just a normal member. Actually, again, my original background is coming from project controls, risk management, and things that you may don't know about me, that in my parallel life, I'm a novelist, a theater writer, actor, and director. I hope those who are reading Arabic will give me the pleasure of reading one of my novels and tell me what do you think. So I will have introduction, and I will then go to the common methods, implementation protocols, MIPs in Egypt, in the Egyptian market, and I'm going to give some examples. Again, given the lovely presentation, the informative presentation given by Yazeed, yes, in the Egyptian market is very similar to the Australian market related to the references used. We are commonly using the SCL delay and disruption protocol, and even the naming of the methods itself is related more to the terminologies used in the SCL delay and disruption protocol. Recently, because some of the projects that is taking place in Egypt are more or less like international projects with international funds. The project is getting a bit complicated, so we got exposed to some huge projects that the contractor elected to go for the AACI protocols. We have two AACI protocols, as Yazeed mentioned. We have the RP2903 related to the retrospective analysis, aka also known as the forensic analysis, and we have the RP5206, which is related to the prospective time impact analysis. The thing is, and the question, the $1 million question in dealing with delay analysis in the Egyptian market is that do we really have a choice? Or in another word, is it up to the analyst to choose what MIP he or she prefers to use for analyzing delays? In order to shed light on this issue, I'm going to start my introduction to introduce an arbitration case between company A, which is the contractor, the claimant, and employer B for a chemical industrial project in Egypt, multi-billions Egyptian pounds project. I was the I was the expert witness from the contractor side in this arbitration. And during the arbitration, the tribunal asked, why did you use MIP 3.6? Apart from the SCL, the RP2903, the retrospective part, is highlighting the methods as their basic implementation by MIP. MIP stands for Method Implementation Protocol, and they are categorizing the types of methods in layers. So layer 1 is referring to the timing, layer 2 referring to the timing means prospective or retrospective. Layer 2 is referring to the basic concept. In the case of retrospective, is it a static logic or a dynamic logic? In case of the modeled, so in case of the modeled part, is it additive or subtractive? And then in layer 3, which is starting by 3, starting from 3.1 up to 3.9, every method can be named or can be called the basic implementation. So the basic implementation can be categorized as retrospective, observational, or modeled. If observational, static, or dynamic. If modeled, is additive or subtractive. So in this case, the contractor elected to use MIP 3.6, which is retrospective, modeled, single base, which is in the SCL, the impact as planned, as Mr. Yazeed mentioned. It's the impact as planned has a lot of shortfalls. And the good thing about the RP, I'm not just promoting the RP versus the SCL, both are well respected and well established protocol. But in the RP, when it comes to planning, the planning part, the categorization or the description of the method name or the description of the method implementation protocol can give some heads up of what has the analyst done during the analysis. So if I'm saying, for example, MIP 3.6, it is retrospective, modeled, additive single pace. In other name, and this actually has been respected by the RP, it's saying that the common name used in other protocols is the impact as planned. The question is, or the part is, in the RP, for each one of the 9 method plus one, the other method, which is the mentioned, the other RP 5206, which is the prospective analysis time impact, the 9 retrospective methods are demonstrated inside the RP by shedding the light on, or not even detailed, demonstrated in details how the method is implemented, what are the precautions, what are the requirements, what are the quality of documents. In another chapter, saying that you have the baseline and the update and the as-built, and you have to apply something called source validation protocol to validate that these sources are adequate and can be used properly to develop a good analysis. But anyway, for each MIP in the RP is stating that these are the advantages of using this method, and these are the disadvantages of using this method. The point I'm trying to make here, that the respondent in this case attacked the method, or highlighted that the method is not, I'm going to borrow or quote his word, not accurate enough to give good indication, and the claimant should have used time impact analysis, or one of the time slice methods like Windows analysis, which is in the RP 3.7 or 3, or one of the observational method, to represent his claim. So the normal reply was, yes, I am sure that time impact analysis will give more indicative accuracy. I'm sure that the method of MIP 3.6, which was implemented in this analysis, has a lot of shortfalls, and these shortfalls cannot be debated because these are in the protocol itself. However, here the case speaks, and this is actually the keyword in the Egyptian market when you are dealing. It is not related to maturity or immaturity. It's the key word, which I found out that it is even the keyword in any other markets. The case speaks. What are the available information in the case that enable you to use what method, regardless you are using the SCL or the RP? The case speaks. So in this case, we didn't have any updates. We didn't have proper records for the progress, rather than the daily reports and the weekly reports in other formats rather than time schedule. We have a good base. We have had a good baseline, and we have had a list of the events, including all the delaying events occurred during the project. So the issue here, it was not that whether the method is good or bad. The issue here was what was the suitable method given the available information in the information. So the thing that is commonly impacting the accuracy and the processing of the analysis here in the Egyptian market, I'm not in Egypt now, so but I'm saying here because I work in Egypt for the time being, is that sometimes I'm going to talk about the planning part, not the contractual part. We are quantifying the delay using time schedules. Sometimes the planners or those who are doing forensic analysis or forensic planning are wasting their time by trying to judge or trying to evaluate the construction methodology and the productivity given taken in the baseline versus the quantities, which are, or the progress itself, or how the progress was accumulating, or how the progress was measured. This is actually from the forensic point of view is a waste of time. And I'm quoting the RP here: validation for the forensic purpose may be fundamentally different from validation for the purpose of the project controls. This is a better view of the table in page 12 of the RP 29 of 3 for the retrospective methods, the categorization layer 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And in the 6th layer, the RP is demonstrating the methods in something called the common name. The common name is what we can relate in other protocols. The thing here is that this table was developed for the retrospective. I'm not going to waste your time again by repeating this the classification, and this will take a very long time to be demonstrated. I want to go to the examples, but here is for the retrospective only. The prospective is one method relying on the occurrence of delay, and the prospective thing is when you are implementing prospective analysis, which means that most of the event has not occurred yet. So no reasonable one would quantify and guarantee an extension of time with numbers of days to a contractor based on a prospective analysis, because maybe the contractor has overestimated the event, maybe the contractor has underestimated the event. And the other thing is that we cannot judge the concurrency in terms of the prospective analysis, because we cannot predict that what is going to happen in the future and how much delay the contractor will encounter in the future. Maybe at the time the event occurred in the prospective analysis, not the retrospective analysis. In the prospective analysis, maybe at the time of the event commences, that the contractor would be more delayed than the owner impact, and the concurrency will turn the delay into uncompensable or non-compensable delay. So anyways, this is the categorization. Moving forward, we have what in the Egyptian market, one of the most commonly used method is MIP 3.1, which is a very easy method, a sequential comparison of individual planned and actual activities, and this is under retrospective, observational, static logic, and single base or gross, which is MIP 3.1, the as planned versus asphalt. It is commonly used in the Egyptian market because it's easy, and normally most of and this is common in the Egyptian market, that most of the claims and the extension of time claims don't go to arbitration, don't go to the next level. Some of them did in the last couple of years. However, mostly things are being driven to amicable settlement between owner and contractor before going to any ADR level, even dispute board or before dispute board. And what Yazeed mentioned is the retrospective time slice, or comparing the retrospective time slice reflected here in 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, and I'm combining them, MIP 3.2, 3.2, which are retrospective observational dynamic logic or static logic for 3.2. These are comparing the updates versus the planned in a Windows method or a Windows fashion. So they are comparing the first update with the baseline, and then comparing the update with the predecessor update to monitor the change in the critical path and assign the delay without using fragments in this case. I combine them both because the three of them are technically, from the planning point of view, the same. However, the case here speaks and drive you to either static logic in 3.2 or dynamic logic for 3.3 and 3.4 with an additional step in 3.4. The step is isolating or splitting the progress of the successor and use it in the sequence of the predecessor to just trying to detect or to try to detect whether the contractor played with numbers in his mitigation plan and try to decrease his encounter delay versus the owner delay. But anyways, these methods or the observational method are not that common in Egypt. The observational static or the retrospective observational dynamic static logic using Windows or using time slices under the retrospective analysis. I've seen it once in Egypt in one of the projects coming in the coming slides, but it is a bit difficult in dealing with concurrency, as we are going to see. In the model thing, which are using Fragnet, we have a single base which impact as planned, the one using the baseline, or the 3.7, which is the Windows analysis using the Fragnet. And actually, this is one of the most commonly used one in Egypt, plus 3.1 and 3.6. 3.1 is the as planned versus as built. 3.6 is the impacted as planned. And actually, if you have good record and have things in under control in your project and have a proper documentation system in your project, there would be a question mark if you implemented 3.6, which is the impact as planned, or 3.1, because in the protocol, either the SCL using their common names, or the MIP or the RP2903 using MIP terminology, 3.1, 3.6. The protocols state that these two methods, the indicative accuracy, are not the best accuracy you can achieve. So choosing to go for these two methods plus 3.5, which is the reconstructed, will generate automatically a question mark that need to be answered. Again, we come to the point that the case speaks. The 3.7 is the one mostly used in a project in Egypt, maybe more even than 3.6 and 3.1. And the funny thing is, at a certain point in delay analysis in Egypt, I remember the first assignment, 2007, we were under the impression that Windows analysis, or MIP 3.7, as I realized later, or the time slice analysis using Windows and Fragnets, is the only way to analyze delays. So this was early in 2007, 2008, the first claim I dealt with. However, it is a good, a very good method that can give relatively more reliable outputs, and very acceptable, or highly acceptable, not accurate, measures and quantification when it comes to concurrent delay. The first project here I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to mention any project name, of course, for the sake of confidentiality. This project is a mixed-use project developed in 2019. It's under construction as of now, and the remarkable thing about this project, that the contractor, which was and still an international joint venture, used 3.3/3.4 as their method of implementation, which is observation, retrospective, observational, no Fragnet in the used. He tracked the delays by trade and by monitoring the change of the critical path and the update, the change of sequence and the impact of the client input and event by trade, not by cause-based approach, by effect-based approach, the other method of quantifying the impact of the, or collecting the delays. So in this case, what has driven, or had driven, the contractor to go this way is that most of the delays type were disruption. And actually, I can presume, and actually it was mentioned between the lines in the RP, that the observational category of the methods were developed in the first place to cover the disruption delays. So the disruption delays is very difficult to be represented in Fragnets. So the observation is the most adequate one. And actually, this was the real reason why the guy, or the analyst coming did the analysis for this project used, or elected to use, to go for the observational method. The second project was an international airport, opened and went operational on 2017. And there were two claims. Actually, one claim analyzed by two methods. The most common method is 3.7, which is the window analysis, or the windows analysis, or the time slice analysis, retrospective time slice analysis using fragments. However, there is a method in the RP used at this time only, which is 3.5. 3.5 means, or simply states, that you are going to a project and you don't have neither the baseline nor the update. You have only records, and you have the project document, of course. So simply you go and develop a baseline and develop the updates. So, and try to compare what you develop and get a result. This is actually a special case. That's why I said 3.5 is one of the methods that raises a question mark once you elect to go for it. So the first claim was based on 3.5, and then the second claim went to 3.7. I've mentioned some notes related to each one, and I'm saying that in this case, the AOT was developed by a third party, not full-time present on site. Neither baseline nor update were provided to the claim developer, which indicated the absence of the project schedule, which was not true. Proper records are available in form of reports, IRs, variation instructions, labor records, submittal logs, and material delivery logs. So the guy who or the third party hired by the contractor to develop the delay events or the delay analysis using the 11 delay events occurred during the project elected to go for 3.5 and went through up to the end and gave the claim based on this method. Actually, we agreed to revise and resubmit the claim again using the common method at that time, which was 3.7. And actually, this was the project subject of the arbitration mentioned at the introduction. The chemical factory and we, the contractor, stepped inserted the events into the baseline using impact as planned, which is an easy one. However, the reason here was not that it's an easy method. The reason here was that there were no project updates. Only the baseline. The baseline was well structured, and the events are there and clear and can be presented in fragments, not mostly disruption. Most of them are direct change order and additional work. The challenge, or the big challenge in Egypt when we are talking about the real challenge in Egypt when we are talking about delay analysis is first the records itself, or the way of recording the project information, the quality of the programs itself, and the level of details of the program that should be adequate to enable the analyst to do a proper analysis. And the big thing, which is, I think it's an issue in all claim analysis all over the world, which is the concurrency. So the most controversial part, the calculation of concurrency is the most controversial subject all over the world, actually, in delay analysis. Even here in the US, I was attending the Western Winter Workshop, an international conference organized by the association in the past 3 days. And all the discussions conducted related to delay analysis was still insisting that the most controversial part is the concurrency. So it's a global issue, not only in Egypt. We normally use Primavera P6. We are not that familiar with Acumen Fuse. However, I used it in some projects in the US here when I was involved in some cases in the US. However, this is not the issue. We're talking about the Egyptian market. The Egyptian market, normally, we are familiar with Primavera P6 and their application. In construction, we don't normally use Microsoft Project. It's not a commonly used software in the construction. that's all for the Egyptian market for the time being. I hope I have been a useful resource during the past 30 minutes, and I'm open to questions if there is any. Thank you very much, guys, and it has been a pleasure being with you during this presentation. And I wish to continue contributing with other respectable chapters to share information and experience with you. I'm opening the camera to just salute everyone, and I'm going to close it again. And thank you very much again for your time, and hopefully I added something to your great experience. The mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Hussam. It's been very insightful. We still have 15 minutes to about some questions. I'm going to start by reading one from Mortesa. He's asking, from your experiences, when a case goes to the court, either in Australia or Egypt, does the court really use a best practice forensic construction schedule delay analysis to make a fair judgment? How can you guys want to answer this question? Do you prefer go first, Yazeed, or Hussam?
I will let Yazeed start.
Thanks, Hussam. Yeah, well, I would say courts, and probably that was in the sample case I referred to in my presentation, courts would not necessarily rely on common industry practice in terms of delay analysis methods. Courts are interested in facts. So whatever method you use and whatever nature of the project is, or whatever status of the project is, you need to demonstrate your analysis that is based on facts. So if you produce an impacted program at a court level, saying that the completion date will be in 6 months, for example, and everyone knows that the project is already completed, that will directly be rejected by the court. So I'm quite confident in saying that courts would only accept facts, and they will not give heavy weight to common industry practice, including those guidelines in terms of the application of any kind of method. What do you think, Hussam?
I totally agree with you, Yazeed. Yes, the court won't care about the common industry practice more than caring about how the analysts from both sides are recording the facts and the coherence of both time schedules and delay analysis. I would share with you one of my experiences when it comes to details, and when we are talking about a court. And one court in one tribunal in one of my previous the case I contributed with, they went to details. We both has very good analysis. Both has the claimant and the respondent, and the court hired a third party to validate technically the planning part of both parties. So the court or the tribunal is mandated to give a fair judgment. So whatever it takes, they will go for it. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, guys. I don't think we have any other question. However, I do have one. So, of course, based on what you just told us, one of the key problems of delay analysis is the lack of proper records, the source of data and their availability. Have you noticed, guys, any improvement over the years to tackle this, or is it still being a problem and there's nothing being done?
Okay, Yazeed, go ahead.
Thanks, Hussam. Yeah, I have to be fair. I have to say that there has been some improvement, but not enough, probably. So contractors started getting more mature in terms of maintaining proper records, but far from being enough to demonstrate their entitlement in terms of delay or disruption. Is that the case for you, Hussam?
I would agree again with you, Yazeed. Actually, we are in a good agreement during this presentation. Yes, there has been a good improvement during the past years in recording, especially during the past period. The past period big title is problems and clashes. We have a lot of economical issues. We have the COVID. We have an ongoing war now. And I think a lot of issues occurred between contractors and owners. That in parallel to this, the technological advance of the EDMS stands for Electronic Document Management System, allowed a lot of platforms that enable good recording with no that much cost and with not that much effort. You don't need to hire an engineer or engineers to go and do documentation and archiving. You just need a good platform, and now every Tom, Dick, and Harry is developing his own platform, and this is something healthy actually. So yes, there is a good improvement in the matter of documentation, and it is mandatory to have this kind of improvement because we are going into a lot of struggle in the coming period in terms of disputes.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. Thank you, guys. I know as well, even SharePoint can help us to record information, data, and nowadays there's, as you guys said, there's a huge improvement in the technology space. I think that's going to help. At least that's what we are foreseeing. We have another question from Lou. Do you guys think that it would be of value to engage forensic analysis at the start of the project to set up better schedule? Do you think that adds value?
Yes. 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 In my view, yes.
Yeah, well, I would also agree with this. My own personal experience, we have some projects who start engaging us very early at an advising role. So we don't necessarily stay full time on the project. We just from time to time attend meetings, oversee what doing in terms of planning and project controls. If we see anything alarming, we just let them know, and that doesn't even contradict with our role as independent experts at the end. All we're doing is just giving them early advice on what issues they may have, and if they are facing delays, how to deal with those delays.
We find on many projects that setting the schedule at the start of the job often struggles, and we don't get it set until we're into the project. And my experience is that if you do set the schedule early, even before you award the contract, then you've got a better chance of measuring its progress against it, and then hence making the analysis of delays easier. We tend to get a program from a contractor. Oh, this is the schedule. Okay, looks okay. Sign it, start, and then the problem starts. And then we'd have to employ people like Hussam and Yazeed. And I'd rather employ you at the start of the job rather than the end.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Lou. I think the difficulty we have here is that they don't normally have budget for involving people early at this stage. And
projects certainly seem to find the budget to employ lawyers and forensic analysts at the end of a project.
Yeah, well that's how we typically deal with issues like we wait for the problem to happen, then we invest.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I ask Hussam a question here, please? Paul Harris here. I do a little bit of delay analysis. I do a couple of cases a year, and I normally get involved to do schedule analysis. But my biggest criticism in Australia is none of the contracts have any words worth repeating, explaining how people should calculate delays and submit them. And our contracts are absolutely appalling in this country, with very little guidance at all. And of course, the first argument is, most contracts say the delay's got to be calculated on the critical path, but none of the contracts say which critical path. So, or which schedule, do you take the original contract schedule, the revised contract schedule, the last updated one? So it provides confusion rather than clarity. What do you find about contracts in Egypt? Do they have words and guidance as to how contractors should document and claim delays, or are they as bad as our Australian contracts?
Yes, well, we are trying. We've been trying to impose this, Paul. Up to 2015, there were none. This was a continuous argument between those who are working in the forensic planning from the planning side and those who are taking the claims from the contractual part. The point of view of those who are talking about contracts is that we don't want to enforce something in the contract that may shed liability on either parties. So if the owner is saying that you have to use XYZ method, the contractor might say that okay, you asked me to do this, and you didn't provide this, that. So the thing is, we succeeded to mention in some major development projects in Cairo and Egypt, we succeeded to mention the reference. So in a level, we added a clause in the contract stating that you have to refer to the SCL. You have to refer developing your calculation to the RP or the association's analysis. Other developers went other way and said we need to apply time impact analysis, and this is the method which is required by the contract to be implemented. But the question raises here that if you open the table of the RP, you will find 9 methods can be called time impact analysis. I mean the retrospective, or you mean the prospective time impact analysis. So it's a bit controversial, but the positive thing we managed to add in some contracts, in a lot of contracts, not some contracts, that we managed to mention the reference. You have to go to a reference. So some people who are tending to prefer the SCL mentioned the SCL. Others mentions the RP.
Yeah, okay. So you say in the same position as us. I know that the CIOB, the Chartered Institute of Building in the UK, have a very comprehensive standard contract for complex projects, and I helped write the pages in there with 15 other people. But that's got some really good words on how the schedule should be submitted and updated, and claims. Delay claims evaluated and actually, the documentation there, and I like that. But as for the rest of the other issues we have here, is some people put words in the contract, but then the contractor doesn't adhere to the words, and the customer doesn't enforce them. So you might have some words in the contract, but they're a waste of time because nobody takes any notice of them. So I get really cynical on all of this.
And I would tell you that in the American contracts with the engineering Corps of Engineers in the US, they mandate using MIP 3.6.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Some of the American contracts with the engineering Corps of Engineering in the US, but I've never seen something like this in Egypt. To that level of specification. To that specified level, use MIP X.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Much appreciated.
Most welcome.
There's one last question. We still have 4 more minutes from Lou. Is in Australia there is a lack of properly prepared basis of schedule, listing assumptions and methodologies. Any experience in Egypt?
Can you just repeat the question again, please?
Sorry, Hussam. Very often in our projects here in Australia,
Associated with the schedule is a basis of schedule which lists the assumptions and how it's calculated in terms of working rosters and production rates, etc. And we tend not to do it very well. Some people do, some people don't. What's your experience in Egypt?
Well, it depends on the entity, Lou. Yeah, the huge projects here in Egypt managed by huge funds or sponsored by huge funds coming from the government or the laws. Once we go for FEDEC or once we go for international contract template, we the owners do this. The owners do this, set how, and they actually, some owners are attaching something called a schedule management plan inside their request for proposals. That's how we want the schedule being done, and that's how we are going to evaluate the schedules. And these are the productivity rates you are going to use in developing the schedule, and this is the level of details you are going to use in developing the schedule. In terms of schedule, we do have some specifications related to developing the schedule, but in huge projects, in major projects in Egypt, not in small projects. Some of the developers are not the small development projects like compounds and small compounds or stuff like this. They are not wasting they're not wasting their time. It's not a waste of time. They are tending to do it with a lot of grace periods, depending on the fund coming from those who are buying the units and stuff. However, in major project, yes, we do have some very good specification related to the schedule, and we are following something called the 14-point schedule check, following the generally accepted schedule principles, and we elaborated on this in some contracts. Adding criteria to evaluate the schedule and the WBS, and with the way of coding and the way of reporting. I would, if you are interested, I would share some of these documents with you. Just drop me an email, and I will share some of these documents with you, and with everyone with anyone who's interested in reading something like this.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
Lou, I can only say that I absolutely concur with you, and whenever I'm reviewing a schedule, I won't accept it unless I've got a basis of schedule from the contractor, and that normally upsets them pretty much.
Yeah, look, yeah, exactly. And my experience is that the owners or developers tend to do it, but the contractors are often very vague. Sometimes you know that they want to keep things vague so that they can actually come back at you later during the project.
Yeah, well, probably my own experience on this law is that even contractors do not know the basis of their own schedule. So I normally go to projects, they give me the schedule, and I simply ask like, so what's your basis in terms of like, how did you come up with those durations, what resources you planned for, and they don't really know. So it's simple plug in durations, just something to match the milestones of the contract, and it's a huge difficulty.
One project we're working on right now, we've asked specifically for the contractor to give us a basis of his assumptions and tell us specifically what his planned production rates are per discipline or commodity, and tie it back to the estimate. So I'm yet to have that discussion with him, but that's what I've asked for.
Yeah, well, my thoughts, all of this should be deliverable in the contract. When I used to write contracts, I used to say that the schedule was a deliverable, and if they didn't get the schedule, if I didn't get an updated schedule, they didn't get paid.
I think contracts probably not written enough by project controls people.
Yeah, too many lawyers.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I have seen projects in the Middle East, in Dubai, where the progress payment is connected with the progress update. So if you don't submit a progress update showing the physical progress, you won't get paid, but not in Australia.
It happens as well in South Africa.
Sorry, it's on mining projects. We tend to do that. So it's important for us as cost engineers when contracts are being written that we make sure that the payout and breakdown is able to be measured for progress and then obviously measured for payment, and that's a bit of a gap.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was mining projects that I was involved in that we did that. Lou, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen.
All right. Well, I think it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much to Hussam and Yazeed for such a very good presentations. Thank you everyone as well for attending. Is there any final thought? Otherwise, well, have a good day wherever you are in the world, and have a good night to those who are in Australia.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure being here with you. Thank you very much to the section, the Australian section, Engineer Wael and Yazeed. Thank you very much. It's been an honor being with you in such a great presentation, and looking forward to our next event.
Okay. Well, just for your benefit, I'm no longer going to be president of the Australian